To protect my privacy, I've decided to keep my name anonymous. I'm not sure how to begin my story, but I'll do the best I can. I'll start by informing you about the show Blue's Clues. For those of you who have never watched it, Blue's Clues is a show for young children that was created in 1996 and lasted for 10 years with a total of 6 seasons and 142 episodes. The show involves hosts Steve or Joe looking for clues and solving mysteries with help from the audience. Blue was an animated dog who labeled the clues with her paw prints. Blue's Clues was a hit with many little kids, including me. The idea was original, the artwork was amazing, but Steve Burns was the backbone of the show. He played Steve. He was more serious than Barney the dinosaur, but he loved kids and knew exactly how to make them happy. There was just something magical about his enthusiasm that made me want to watch more and more of his episodes. The saddest part of my childhood was when Steve left the show in 2002 and pursued a musical career. He was replaced by Donovan Pat, who played Joe, but it wasn't the same. I stopped watching Blue's Clues after Steve left. The show just lost its magic for me. Joe was nothing like Steve. He was a total goofball, and my mother told me that Donovan was acting too hard. When I was 16, my family moved to a large 3-story house in upstate New York that was previously owned by a nice old lady. After a few weeks after moving in, I decided to do some more exploring in the attic. I found an old trunk. To my surprise. It was filled with a bunch of old VHS tapes. All of them were Blue's Clues. I knew the old lady's cell phone number, so I decided to call her and ask about the tapes. She told me that she bought them from a collector a few years back for her little grandson to watch. After I thanked her and hung up, I emptied the trunk before checking into tapes. All of them had episodes that I already watched, except for one. The one time I found just had a regular sticker, not the factory sticker like all the other tapes. It read, Blue's Clues Sorrow. I thought the title was a little strange, but I figured it was just a copy of the Steve Goes to College episode. The one where Steve goes off to college and Joe took his place. Because Steve said goodbye to all of his friends in that episode, I considered it to be very sorrowful indeed. When my parents went on their anniversary trip and left me in charge of the house one night, I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to check out the tape. Our TV has a VCR, and I have to admit, I felt a tingle of excitement when I placed the tape in the player. I was about to relive some childhood memories of watching Blue's Clues. I didn't care that I was too old to watch it. I knew for sure that I would enjoy it. At least that's what I thought. The episode started off completely normal. The Blue's Clues book opened up and Steve looked out his window. Hi there, it's me, Steve. Have you seen Blue? Wait, she's not here. Well, come on in. The front door opened and Steve was in the living room looking concerned. I need to tell you something important. Blue's at the vet and she's having an operation on her heart. I hope she's okay. Steve stopped talking and looked down at the floor. The scene ended. The next scene shows Steve at the vet. He sat in the waiting room without making a sound. He did nothing but stare at the doors which led into the operating rooms. A surgeon opened the door, but she was an animated character. She was a real person like Steve. She whispered in Steve's ear, but I could hear everything she said. Her heart stopped beating. We tried our best, but we couldn't get it to beat it again. I'm sorry. The scene ended. The next scene started with a title card saying that a month had passed after Blue's funeral. A deep voice spoke. There are 5 stages in the grieving process: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Steve will experience 3 stages all at once: depression, anger, and mental illness. Steve was in his room, lying in bed. He began to cry, and the color of the episode turned black and white like a depressing old photograph. Steve cried so hard his breathing grew shallow. The next scene showed Steve sitting up on his bed. He stopped crying, but his face was now red and his teeth were clenched slightly. Steve held his stuffed anteater, Horace, with both hands. His scream sent chills down my spine. Steve ripped off Horace's head and black ooze squirted out of the stuffed animal's neck. Steve threw Horace in a fit of rage, and when the anteater landed, its ooze completely covered the floor. I fought the urge to vomit. Against my better judgment, I decided to keep watching. Steve's body began to turn a darker color by the second. After about 5 seconds, Steve turned completely back. He got out of bed and walked into his living room. I thought he was going to sit in his big red thinking chair, but he didn't. He stood in front of the chair and stared at the screen for a few minutes. His eyes lost their pupils and became nothing more than white dots. He started crying again, and white tears streamed down his face. Some sad piano music began to play. The music was so heartbreaking, I shed a few tears myself. A message flashed across the screen. You can figure out Blue's Clues, but you can't figure out insanity. The next scene showed Steve still standing in the living room, and he was no longer crying and his body was a completely normal color. I can't live without Blue. She was my best friend. She gave my life happiness and meaning. Without her, I've nothing left to live for. The kids in the background that helped Steve find the clues started to cry and whimper. They shouted, "Please don't do it, Steve! We love you! We're your friends too!" "I'm sorry," Steve said. "But I'm sorry if I have to break your hearts for doing this, but I have no choice. Goodbye." He held up a container. The camera zoomed in on the label, which said potassium cyanide. Steve had a calm look on his face as he swallowed the contents of the container. He instantly collapsed onto the carpet. He foamed at the mouth, while his body twitched and thrashed on the floor like he was being executed. Steve eventually stopped moving and I knew he was dead. The episode finally ended as my TV cut to static. I sat still, dazed. It took my brain a few minutes to comprehend what I just watched. I made the decision then and there to play the detective and find out where in the world this episode came from. I looked up the name of the episode online, but came up with nothing. I knew that ViacomCBS owned Blue's Clues because their company name was shown on the factory stickers of the other VHS tapes. After a bit of research, I wrote a letter to ViacomCBS HQ. I told them about my experience and asked them if they knew where the tape came from. 2 weeks later, I got a reply in the mail. "Dear Mister, thank you for taking the time to write to us. We were quite surprised by your story about the unaired episode of Blue's Clues that you discovered. We are grateful that you contacted us concerning it. We can personally assure you that ViacomCBS Media Networks, as well as ViacomCBS itself, claims no ownership or liability whatsoever regarding the episode. However, we still feel that an explanation is in order. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide details of the tape's creation as we don't know how this happened. Back in 2002, we received a VHS tape in a package with no return address. The words Mr. Ted were written on the package. Along with the tape, there was a letter from Mr. Ted stating that he was the biggest fan of Blue's Clues and asked for our approval to air his fan-made creation on television. We were quite flattered that a fan would send us a fan-made episode for airing. However, when our editors viewed the episode for refinement, they were quite appalled by its nature. A few of the staff who viewed the episode unbelievably went into shock and had to be transported into the emergency room immediately. Due to the horrifying content, we had absolutely no plans to air this episode. We had passed the tape to a private collector, but we were dismayed to discover that he had many copies made. We ask that you please do not release the contents of this tape or the letter to the public, as we do not want to upset the viewers who love and support our shows for young children. With warm regards, Michael D. Frickless, Executive Vice. Questions bounced around in my head, and I still do to this day. Who is Mr. Ted? How was he able to create this demonic episode? Is he even, human? Out of respect for CBS, I'm afraid I cannot provide any footage. However, I figured releasing a single screenshot and a copy of the letter and the tape to the public wouldn't make them too pissed. You're probably wondering, why are you telling me this? What's the point of the story? To be honest, I just wanted to get it off my chest. I've kept it a secret for a little while, but I eventually felt the desire to tell someone, whether they believe me or not. A part of my brain told me to throw away the tape and the letter, but I've kept both in my closet to remind me what I experienced was real. In fact, now I realize that some so-called fans of TV shows are not as normal as you might think they are.